All right, well, welcome back, everyone, to 101 Questions That Church Planters Ask. I'm your host, Danny Parmalee, and very excited today to have Jon Ferguson with us. Jon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Danny. Great to be with you this morning. Glad you asked for me to join you.
Yeah, you bet. And for those that don't know Jon, he's a co-founder of Community Christian Church in the Chicagoland area and a founder, important person within the Exponential Conference, New Thing Network, author of multiple books, and just a good all-around guy. So, Jon, you've had an influence on me and impact on me in my ministry. So I'm really thankful to have you with us today. So
clearly, you don't know me very well, but thank you for that.
And we're going to tackle a question today. Is it okay to steal people from other churches? Now, specifically looking at church planters, kind of developing the launch team. And just a little background, my kind of training was you can't grow by transfer growth. So it was kind of like taught early on, whatever you do, don't take people from other churches. It's a really bad thing. So I'll kind of just tee it up that way for you, and you can kind of just speak to it, and then we'll kind of dive in a little bit on this question, if it's okay to, quote unquote, steal people from other churches.
Sure. And I like how you put that, Danny, because, we're all taught that that's not the focus. And I think that's a great place to start. I mean, obviously, the mission is in the vernacular that we use at Community, it's all about helping people find their way back to God, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we know that we're about reaching lost people. And so, secondly, I think we have to remember they're going to bring baggage, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then thirdly, I think it's all about relationship with that person and relationship with the church they may be coming from. But ultimately, I think you do have to remind yourself, that isn't the goal. The goal isn't to, as they say, kind of rearrange the furniture of the kingdom. Mm-hmm. The goal is to reach people who are far from God. And so having said that, we know, though, once you get in the trenches of church planting, you're trying to build a launch team, you're trying to gather enough people so that it feels like, okay, there might be some interest in this new thing. You'll pretty much take anybody and everybody you can, right? So, I mean, just as a foundation, that's not what we're going for, but it does happen. They do come.
Yeah. And I think that, part of it is that I was so sold on that core value of like, you only grow through, evangelistic means. I literally was turning people away in the beginning. Like, no, you have to go back to your church. This is a bad move for you to be able to come here. And what I was realizing, what I was doing is I was actually even setting up a core value that then I would own people. That if anyone ever left my church, then another pastor was actually stealing from me. And it really gave a bad perspective on people and mission, that somehow, churches own people or that pastors own people. And honestly, it was a pretty toxic thing in my own kind of early years, probably even up to the first 5 years of church planting. So I've shifted quite a bit to try to train church planters to not have that tight fist, so to speak, or even to think of it in that sort of way, but to have a missional mindset. So I don't know if with church planters that you work with, how you help them to navigate, and obviously each situation is different, but if you could walk through a couple different ones. If they say, hey, there's this couple that's coming from XYZ to join my church, what should I do? How should I handle that?
Yeah, great question. And I like how you said that, Danny, because I think it is important that how you sort of establish yourself at the beginning is going to be an indicator for how people perceive their relationship with you as well. And I think holding on loosely like that is so important because, I mean, you may be the shiny new thing right now, right? Mm-hmm. But you're not going to be really soon, okay? And so people are going to be leaving your place for other places, and you got to early on figure out how you're going to handle that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love how you put that, I think, from the beginning. I think your question really was, how have I handled that with church planters? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? I think so much of it's about relationship. I kind of go back to that. Yeah. And it's really twofold. It's your relationship with those folks that may be coming from another church, but it's also your relationship with that church that they may be coming from. Okay. And there's a lot of variables, I think, with that church they might be coming from too. Now, if you're friendly with the pastor from the church they may be coming to, then to me, yeah, you owe that pastor a conversation. Mm-hmm. Talk to him and say, hey, look, so-and-so, even better yet, probably would be to ask the people that are thinking about coming to go to that pastor first, or someone that they're accountable to. and let them know, hey, here's what we want to do. And then immediately, though, then you as the pastor of the new church, you go to that pastor and say, hey, look, I know so-and-so has talked to you. I want to talk to you as well. They're talking about coming and being a part of this thing. And, I hope, you'll see that as a great opportunity for your church to send and a way for you to be on mission with us, because it's going to be a huge win for us. And we want to share that win with you. So it doesn't feel like, somebody's kind of sneaking away, or, we're sheep stealing, or whatever you might want to call it. So best case scenario, is for that other church to embrace it, see that as a sending opportunity, and for everybody to celebrate together. Now, we know that doesn't always happen, right? But that to me, like, if you can make it happen that way, that's awesome. And I'm quite honestly, I'd say more and more, I feel like that's becoming the norm.
Mm-hmm.
I think as churches recognize, hey, look, we're all in this together. We're better together. We're all friends on mission. And, new churches need new people. They need mature people that can develop others. And if I could be a part of that, then that's a big win. And I would hope that, they would bring that family or that couple, that person up in front of their church and say, hey, look, Bob and Jill want to be a part of the new church. You've heard us talk about that new church. Mm-hmm. It's going to be starting up, in X number of months in this part of the community. We want to encourage that and support that. Let's pray for them. Let's bless them, and let's send them to be a part of that new work that's going to reach even more people. So, that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the things, too, to tie it together, what you said in the beginning is, as people do transfer, they also tend to come or can come with baggage as well, too. And so the stronger the relationship is with that local pastor, you're able to sometimes uncover that stuff before it happens, which doesn't mean that they wouldn't necessarily be part of your church, because maybe this would be an opportunity for you to pastor and minister to them. Maybe there's something that kind of happened, bad within the church, just circumstantial. And you can say, okay, well, maybe this is even a time of healing, and maybe they stick with you, and maybe they even have that time just to heal and to repair. And if you don't have that relationship with the pastor, you may blindly be stepping into something that you have no idea, and you have no idea of the context of what's going on. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, you do need to dig in and kind of find out, okay, what's the motive behind them wanting to leave and be a part of what you're doing or what God's doing through you? What's the motive for them leaving the previous church? Because if there is some, relational disconnect, or if there's some division, or, if they're leaving because they don't like this or don't like that, chances are 6 months down the road, they're not going to like this or that about whatever you're doing too. And so you're better off to make sure they resolve that in their current context, rather than bringing that with them to you. I think we've all seen that before, right? Because we've all been a part of new churches. When somebody comes, they love it for 6-9 months. Next thing you know, they're complaining to you about the very things they were complaining about from the previous situation. So definitely encourage them, challenge them to deal with that as much as you can. Either, and if you know the pastor of that place, even better, because they can work together through that. But absolutely deal with whatever issues they're struggling through before they come and join a new thing, because they're just going to pollute whatever you're trying to do. That's not going to be good for anybody.
Yeah. Now, you keep saying new thing, and so is that like the subconscious way to get that? Which is actually funny, because it's actually my next thing that I was going to say is I've actually appreciated so much new things, kind of kingdom collaboration's been really part of the ethos of it. Can you explain just a little bit what new thing is and how it even works as kind of like within a city, and that there are churches that are, they're a part of different networks or a part of different denominations, and that relationship amongst pastors and church planters has really helped in this whole thing of having people have a missional mindset, and not just, okay, you're married to this church, and if you leave it, you've done something wrong, it's sinful, which I used to tell people that, I'm like, this is a marriage. You don't get divorced. This is lifelong. I know,
man. Don't you just shudder to think what's said? And not that you're like all enlightened now and mature, but seriously, I was so offended, so upset at the even thought of leaving our church when we first started. It was like an anathema, or whatever the word is. Get behind me, Satan, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And I think what New Thing does is we try to establish networks across denominations, across cultures, across geographies, across denominations, in cities that are working together to start churches together. And truthfully, that is a game changer, even in this conversation, because what's interesting is both staff people and sometimes even families kind of get a track record from bouncing from church to church. And that works pretty well. Okay. When pastors aren't talking to each other.
Right.
The advantages of a network is you're like talking to each other and it's like, oh, so-and-so is coming our way now. And you're like, okay, look, you can keep them.
Yeah.
Because you're in conversation. But it also, I think, broadens your perspective of kingdom too. And you recognize that, okay, you know what? We're going to have these folks for a season. And then, they might go to another church. And guess what? Maybe they have more an apostolic bent anyway, and they need to do that. And they're just going to get kind of tired or maybe lazy or not as, maybe they're not going to bear as much fruit in your context because it's not new. It's not an upstart, and they need to go somewhere else. But one of the things I think that we try to do with New Thing is bring churches together and networks so those conversations happen. I think you recognize the kingdom's a lot bigger than just your church, that we're all in this together. We're trying to advance the cause citywide or region-wide. And one of the ways we can do that is be in conversation about people and how they can be best kind of deployed to advance the kingdom, wherever that might be.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so just kind of as we're getting close to the end here, for a church planter that's going into a new community, maybe they've even moved, it's the parachute or whatever, how do they begin to establish relationships with other pastors? And certainly some other pastors may have been burnt in the past, or they have their own pride and ego issues, don't even want to have a conversation. Any just kind of advice for how a church planter can come in with humility to begin some of those relationships with other pastors and churches?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that. And that was one of the things as I was thinking about our conversation, Dan, I think humility is huge in this whole conversation of people jumping from church to church or starting up and kind of being the new guy or new woman in town and what that can look like. And I'll tell you what, even though community has been around for a long time, when I moved into the city to help start new locations in the city, I became a church planter again, even though I've had 20 years of experience in ministry. And one of the first things I did was started to connect with local pastors just to kind of say, hey, look, you guys have been in the city. We were in the suburbs prior to that time. You guys have been in the city for a long time. Tell me how not to be that guy.
Yeah, that's great.
With the bravado and thinks he's got it all together. Well, all you have to do is church plant in the city for about 6 months, and all the bravado's gone anyway, right?
Yeah.
I really didn't even need to ask them. It just happened. But it was really good, and they were super welcoming, and they gave me some great advice. But I would challenge any church planter, just be open with that. Be very forward about that call. Now, quite honestly, some people might not give you the time of day, but at least you made the effort. I think where it feels weird is when you find out kind of secondhand that maybe, and again, this is God's kingdom, man. I mean, we don't own any territory, right? Really ourselves. But it does feel a little bit weird when you find out secondhand that somebody's coming to a neighborhood right near you, especially if it's somebody you kind of know or feel like you have a connection with, and they didn't bother to call or at least to kind of let you know or to ask for your input or advice. Because look, you can learn from anybody, right? Yeah. And so going in there, I think, and just kind of saying, hey, we're here, we're starting this deal. Would love your input and advice, anything you have on what it looks like to navigate life and or ministry in this community. And I think keep in mind too, when unfortunately we all feel a little bit threatened, whether we admit it or not.
Yeah.
And I think you always just kind of have to remember, nobody really gets into this. People get into this for good motives. They want to reach people far from God. They want to advance the kingdom. And so no matter what you may have heard or been told about somebody, you need kind of to push that aside and go into it with fresh eyes and work that relationship. And join a network as soon as you can. Find out what's going on in that city and become a part of it. You'll be surprised, I think, how welcomed you are, and how that opens your eyes to what God's doing on a larger scale.
Yeah, that's great. I know for some church planners it can be hard too, because they do reach out and they do get the cold shoulder a little bit. And I remember being frustrated as a young church planner, and I'm reaching out to pastors. They don't want anything to do with me. And I'm like, gee, I had such a judgment on them until then I was the established church. And then, the church planners are coming and I'm doing my egotistical eye roll and like, we've got it covered. No need to come here. Right. And so, so I just, I encourage church planners reach out. Some pastors are going to embrace, some might even be skeptical, but that's okay. Just try to, put yourself in their shoes for a moment, right. And anything that you can do. And what I found is that I needed to continue those relationships, because I used to tell the area planters and pastors, the longer we don't spend time together, you grow horns. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, right
you have that it just automatically like, they're selling out. They're not teaching real theology. Just over time. And then I'd sit down and have coffee. Like, I really like you. We're both trying to do the same thing.
And that's one of the beauties of these networks is, there's accountability to stay in relationship, to connect consistently and regularly over time. And you really begin to like people that you may never have thought you would like before. They're not like you necessarily, but you're in it together. Yeah. And I think part of that's just, assume the best. Why not? Go into it assuming the best, because you've probably been in those situations where maybe you could tell somebody wasn't assuming the best about you. And you're like, hey, is there something I did to give you the impression that maybe I don't want to send some people to your church plant? Assume that maybe I do.
Right.
And you're coming to me thinking you're going to have to apologize for this when I'm going,
exactly.
No, this is awesome. How else can we help?
Exactly. And I think that's great. The reciprocal thing that you go to them saying, hey, I want to know, as people come to my church, if they're not a good fit at the church plant, I want to know some other good pastors and other good churches that I trust, so that I would be able to send them there. And I'll give you a heads up, and I'll let you know if someone is coming with bad motives or baggage or whatever. And that way we can kind of work together.
I think where it gets hardest in these scenarios, is when it's someone that's coming from maybe another newer church plant, or maybe a smaller struggling church. That's where it gets tough. But even in those scenarios, I think, relationship is everything. And make sure the person that's coming and considering being a part of what you're doing is going back to their leadership, having those conversations. And then you also taking the time to say, hey, look, here's what's going on. I'd love to talk to you about this.
That's awesome. Well, Jon, thank you so much, not only just for our time here today, but just for what you're doing in the church planting world and as a church planter in Chicago. And we pray blessings upon you and everyone else that is out there doing it. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks a lot, Danny.